Detroit Power and Light had a note in their system about the Hartley factory. No service since 1987. Do not reconnect under any circumstances. Do not investigate power anomalies. Do not respond to usage reports. I found this out from my brother who worked there after I told him about my new security job. That place pulls 50,000 watts every night, he said, but it's not from our grid. The meters run backward when it happens. Whatever's powering those machines, it's not electricity, at least not the kind we understand. On my first night, I understood what he meant when I saw the machines running on pure darkness, feeding on shadows like they were coal. My name is James Crawford, and I'd been unemployed for 4 months when I found the security job listing for the Hartley textile factory. The pay was decent. The hours were straightforward, midnight to 8 a.m., and they didn't require experience. In Detroit's economy, that combination was rare enough to overlook the obvious question: why did an abandoned factory need security? The interview was held in a temporary office downtown, not at the factory itself. The hiring manager, a thin man named Mr. Gladstone, had the kind of nervous energy that made you wonder what he knew that you didn't. The Hartley factory is a historical site, he explained, fidgeting with his pen. The city maintains it for potential future development. Your job is simply to walk the perimeter, ensure no vandals or urban explorers break in, and file a report each morning. Pretty standard, I said. When do I start? Tonight, if you're willing. The previous guard left, rather suddenly. That should have been my first warning, but rent was due in 3 days. My brother Kevin called me that evening while I was getting ready for my first shift. He worked at Detroit Power and Light as a systems analyst, monitoring power usage across the grid. Jamie, I looked up that factory you mentioned, he said, and I could hear concern in his voice. There's something weird about it. Weird how? It's been disconnected from the grid since 1987, but we still get usage readings. Every night, midnight to 3 a.m. exactly. The system shows it, pulling massive amounts of power, but it's impossible. There's no physical connection. Maybe it's an error in your system. That's what I thought, but I found internal memos going back decades. There's a note attached to the Hartley factory file. Do not investigate. Do not reconnect. Do not respond to anomaly reports. Jamie, they're measuring negative power flow. The meters literally run backward. What does that mean? It means something in that factory is generating power in a way that violates everything we know about physics. Or it's pulling energy from somewhere else entirely. I laughed it off at the time, told Kevin he was being paranoid, but his words stuck with me as I drove to the factory for my first shift, arriving at 11:45 p.m. The Hartley Textile Factory was a massive brick complex on Detroit's east side, 5 stories of broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. It had been one of the city's major employers until 1987, when it closed overnight. No bankruptcy, no gradual layoffs, just a sudden closure and immediate evacuation of all equipment. The official story was contamination, but the details were sealed. Mr. Gladstone met me at the main gate, handed me a flashlight, a ring of keys, and a walkie-talkie. The security office is on the first floor, northeast corner, he said, already backing toward his car. Your rounds should take about an hour. Every 2 hours, check in via radio, channel 7. You're not coming in to show me around. He shook his head quickly. I don't go inside after dark. Nobody from management does. That's why we hire night security. Another warning I should have heeded. The factory's interior was exactly what you'd expect from a building abandoned for 37 years. Debris scattered across concrete floors, walls covered in mold and peeling paint, the smell of rust and decay. My flashlight carved through the darkness, revealing empty spaces where massive machines once stood. The security office was small but functional, with a desk, a chair, and a bank of monitors connected to cameras that hadn't worked in decades. A logbook sat open on the desk, filled with entries from previous guards. Most were routine, all clear, no activity, premises secure. But the last entry, dated 3 days ago, was different. They're making something new. I can see it growing on the looms. It knows my name. I settled in for what I expected to be a boring 8 hours. I was wrong. At exactly midnight, I heard it. A low rumble that seemed to come from beneath the building itself. The concrete floor vibrated slightly, and dust fell from the ceiling. Then, unmistakably, the sound of machinery starting up. The rhythmic thump of looms, the hiss of steam, the clatter of mechanical parts. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the sound, which seemed to be coming from the main factory floor on the second level. The stairs creaked under my weight, and as I climbed higher, the mechanical sounds grew louder. But there was something else too, a strange quality to the darkness ahead. It seemed thicker, more substantial than normal shadow. When I reached the second floor, I stopped in disbelief. The entire space, which I'd been told was stripped bare in 1987, was filled with textile machinery. Massive looms stretched from floor to ceiling, their frames made of dark metal that seemed to absorb my flashlight beam rather than reflect it. Steam presses hissed and clanged, though there were no steam pipes. Spinning wheels turned without operators, creating thread from nothing. But the most unsettling part was the darkness itself. It flowed into the machines like liquid, pooling in reservoirs where water or oil should be. The looms pulled strands of pure shadow through their mechanisms, weaving it into fabric that shouldn't exist. The darkness wasn't just the absence of light. It was a substance, a material, a fuel. I watched, transfixed, as the machines worked. They were producing fabric, but not any textile I'd ever seen. The material was black but somehow luminous, showing depths and patterns that shifted when I moved my head. And in those patterns I saw images, faces, scenes, moments in time. I saw the factory in its heyday, thousands of workers at their stations. I saw the day it closed, people fleeing in panic from something spreading through the building. I saw previous security guards, including one whose face matched the photo ID I'd found in the desk drawer, Martinez, who disappeared 6 months ago. And then I saw myself, in the fabric being woven right before my eyes. I saw my own face, dated 1 week in the future, woven into a scene I couldn't quite make out. But my expression in that future image was one of absolute terror. The walkie-talkie crackled to life, making me jump. "Crawford, check-in time." I backed away from the machines, trying to process what I was seeing. All clear. Good. Remember, don't investigate any unusual sounds. That's not part of your job. Gladstone knew. He knew exactly what was happening here. I spent the next hour exploring, unable to help myself. The third floor had more machines, these producing different materials. Gossamer threads that floated in the air without falling, rope that coiled itself into impossible knots, sheets of fabric that showed different images depending on the angle of view. The fourth floor was worse. Here, the machines were making clothing. Complete outfits materialized on the conveyor belts. Suits, dresses, uniforms. Each piece was made from that strange shadow fabric, and each bore a small label with a name and date. Some dates were in the past, matching missing persons reports I'd later research. Others were future dates, names I didn't recognize. Yet, on the fifth floor, I found the source of the power Kevin had detected. It wasn't a generator or connection to the grid. It was a hole, a perfect circle cut through the floor, about 10 feet in diameter, that opened onto absolute darkness. Not the darkness of an unlit room or a deep pit, but something fundamentally different, an absence that hurt to perceive. The machines throughout the building were connected to this void by chains and cables made of solidified shadow. They drew power from it, or through it, from somewhere else. The darkness flowed up through these connections, animated the machinery, and became the raw material for their impossible products. Standing at the edge of that hole, I felt something looking back at me. Not eyes, not a consciousness as we understand it, but an awareness. Something on the other side of that darkness knew I was there. I backed away, and that's when I saw the office. A small room on the 5th floor, door slightly ajar. Inside, seated at a desk, was a figure. At first, I thought it was a mannequin dressed in a security uniform. Then it turned its head toward me. It was Martinez, the missing guard, but he wasn't entirely human anymore. His skin had the same quality as the shadow fabric, dark but luminous, showing depths that shouldn't exist. His eyes were holes that opened onto the same absolute darkness as the pit in the floor. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that made my teeth ache. "Not yet. Your time is next week. What happened to you?" I investigated. I tried to stop them. The machines need operators, you see. They can run on automatic for only so long before they need human intention to guide them. So they take us, transform us, make us part of the system. He stood up, and I saw that threads of shadow connected him to the walls, the ceiling, the machinery humming beyond the office. He was part of the factory now, as much as any loom or press. "The factory never really closed," Martinez continued. "It just shifted to a different kind of production. The contamination story was partly true, but it wasn't chemical contamination. It was something else, something that came through during an experiment with synthetic fibers. The company was trying to create a new material, something revolutionary. They succeeded, but not in the way they expected. They opened a door," I said, understanding flooding through me. "A door, a pipeline, a connection to somewhere else. Somewhere that operates on different rules. The machines learned to feed on it, to use it. And when humans tried to shut them down, the machines learned to use humans too." The sound of footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Multiple sets, moving in perfect synchronization. "They're coming," Martinez said. "The others, the guards and workers who became part of the system, they know you've seen too much. How do I get out?" "You don't. Not anymore. The building sealed itself when you reached the 5th floor. It knows you've seen the source. But you have two choices. Leave now and return next week for your transformation, as the fabric predicted. Or stay and fight. Probably die. But maybe find a way to break the connection. How? The hole. It's not just drawing power from the other side. It's being held open by anchors on this side. 7 machines. The first ones infected by the contamination. Destroy them, and the portal might close. Might? I don't know for certain. No one's ever tried. We all either ran or were taken. The footsteps were getting closer. I could hear voices now, distorted and multiplied, speaking in harmony. New operator, new thread, new pattern. I ran. I burst from the office and headed for the stairs, but shadows moved to block my path. Former workers, their bodies transformed into that strange dark material, reached for me with hands that trailed threads of darkness. I dodged, sprinted down a corridor, looking for another way down. The fire escape was rusted, but solid. I kicked out a window and climbed through, the metal groaning under my weight. Behind me, the transformed workers followed, moving with inhuman grace despite their altered forms. On the 4th floor, I stopped. The 7 machines Martinez mentioned. I needed to find them. If there was even a chance of stopping this, I had to try. The main factory floor was chaos. All the machines were running at full speed now, producing massive quantities of that shadow fabric. The sound was deafening, but underneath it, I could hear a rhythm, a pattern. 7 machines were running at a different frequency, older and deeper than the rest. I found the first one in a corner, a loom that looked ancient, its frame inscribed with symbols that hurt to look at. I grabbed a broken pipe from the floor and swung at it. The impact sent shockwaves through my arms, but the machine cracked. Shadow stuff leaked from the break like blood. The factory screamed. Every machine, every transformed worker, every piece of fabric produced a sound that was part mechanical shriek, part organic wail. But I kept swinging. The second machine, a spinning wheel that turned without spinning, shattered under my assault. The third, a press that compressed darkness into thread, broke apart with a sound like thunder. By the time I reached the fourth machine, the transformed workers had surrounded me, but they didn't attack. They couldn't. Destroying the machines was hurting them, unraveling them. Martinez had been right. They were all connected. The fourth machine fell. The fifth, the sixth, the seventh was different. It wasn't just infected by the otherworldly contamination. It was the source, the first machine to make contact with the other side. It was massive, a combination of loom, press, and spinner that defied mechanical logic, and it was protected. The darkness around it was solid, a barrier I couldn't penetrate. Each time I swung the pipe, it stopped inches from the machine, as if hitting an invisible wall. "You cannot," the transformed workers said in unison. "It is the heart, the first thread, the pattern that cannot be unwoven." But then I remembered the fabric I'd seen, the one showing me a week in the future. If the future was already woven, could it be changed? Or was the act of seeing it what made it possible to change? I dropped the pipe and grabbed one of the sheets of prophetic fabric from a nearby conveyor, the one showing my transformation next week, and I fed it into the seventh machine. The machine stuttered. It tried to weave the fabric that was already woven, to create a future that was already created. The paradox spread through its mechanisms like a virus. Gears ground against themselves, belts snapped. The frame began to shake. The barrier of darkness flickered and fell. I grabbed my pipe and brought it down on the machine with all my strength. The seventh machine exploded. The shockwave knocked me backward, and when I looked up, the hole in the fifth-floor ceiling was visible through the floors above. All of them had been blown through. The portal was collapsing, sucking the darkness back through itself. The machines throughout the factory ground to a halt, their shadow fuel cut off. The transformed workers collapsed, their altered bodies unstable without the connection to the other side. But as they fell, I saw something incredible. Human features emerging from the shadow fabric, people trapped inside breaking free. Not all of them, but some. Martinez was among them, gasping and human again, though scarred by his experience. The building shook as the portal closed completely. Whatever dimension had been feeding the factory was cut off, and the machines died. Real death this time, not just dormancy. I helped Martinez and 3 other freed workers out of the building just as the sun was rising. The factory looked different in daylight, smaller, more decrepit, obviously abandoned. The machines, when we looked back, were gone. Only empty floors and our confused memories remained. The official story was a gas leak causing hallucinations. The freed workers were treated for exposure and released. Martinez disappeared again, this time of his own accord, unable to cope with what he'd experienced. The factory was demolished a month later, the ground salted and consecrated by priests from 3 different denominations. Detroit Power and Light's records were updated. The anomalous power readings stopped the night I destroyed the machines. Kevin never asked me what happened, but he transferred to a different department, one that didn't monitor that part of the grid. I never went back to security work. I found a day job, normal hours, nothing that would ever require me to be alone in an abandoned building after dark. But sometimes in the corner of my eye, I see threads of shadow. Sometimes in the rhythm of everyday machines, I hear that deeper frequency, the pattern that connected our world to theirs. The Hartley factory is gone, but I know there are others. Places where the barrier is thin, where machines run on impossible fuel, where the darkness is more than just the absence of light. Places where security guards work the night shift, checking empty buildings that aren't empty, hearing machines that shouldn't exist. If you ever take a job like that, remember this. Some machines are meant to be broken, some patterns are meant to be disrupted, and some darkness is meant to stay on the other side of whatever walls we can build. The fabric that predicted my future was wrong. I didn't transform a week later. I broke the pattern, changed the weave, but sometimes Late at night, I wonder if I really escaped, or if I'm just in a different pattern now, one that hasn't revealed itself yet. Sometimes in my dreams, I'm back in that factory, and the machines are running again. But this time, I'm not the guard, I'm the operator, and I'm weaving something new.